Joining me now on the newest episode of Draft Class is first a friend of mine from Knicks Twitter, and second, someone that you all know very well from his work over at the Strickland, one of the hosts over at the Strickland Podcast Network, a contributor to the main site itself. We've got Stacy Patton on this week's episode of DC. Stacy, how we doing, man?
Doing really well. Long-time listener, so very excited to make my KFS debut, but especially Draft Class. So yeah, I mean, I don't think we've done a pod together, period. So obviously on group chats and all of that. So very excited.
Yeah, man, I know we chat a lot of hoops, but never gotten a chance to do it behind the mics. So I'm glad. I tell all my guests this, like, it's so cool to go from listener of their show to host, like co-host on my own with them. That's always really cool, and something I definitely don't take for granted and appreciate. The opportunity just to even sit and talk with you here is awesome. So thank you for coming on. First and foremost, I've been starting off every episode of Draft Class with what I call an autopsy of the state of the New York Knicks, the current young core, but with the focus on the young core. And we know you and I both are high on this young core in terms of relating our opinions to the consensus. The words career sixth man both cause like a nerve to pop.
I like us. IQ in his role. All right. So I gotta start with him. I even wrote this in my notes. We've got to start with Quick. And we've got to just, give you a shot to share some of your thoughts on him, his ceiling, and why you think it's wrong to put one on him. And is he stopping you from drafting other guards? A lot of people, the Prez movement of stop mocking Ty to the Knicks. How do you feel about all that? How do you feel about Quickley, first on his own, and then second, how he's affecting your draft philosophy? Yeah. So on his own, I've said this a bunch before, but even early in the season, and he went through a shooting slump to end all shooting slumps, right? It was really bad. But I kept the two things that stuck out were his pull-up shooting stats never really went that low. He's not an amazing pull-up three-point shooter, like just at least from percentages. He gets off a lot. But his pull-up shooting percentages were in line with last year. It's just last year was a 46% spot-up shooter on threes, and he went all the way down to, I think, 33. I think he was really low. He obviously picked up at the end of the season, but for me, I don't think there was anything mechanical. I think sometimes dudes just miss wide open shots, and it probably, like last season, I probably would have downgraded to, I think he had the potential to be an elite shooter. I'd probably put him closer to very good shooter. That's how I see him ending up, but versatile, right? So I'd rather have somebody who's versatile, who can pull up and who can get the volume, than someone who is like a 43% shooter, but can only hit standstill, right? And that's really, so IQ gives you that. But if you looked beyond the shooting, he was still positive on off, and he was impacting the game in a number of ways.
Yeah, defensively too, both ends of the court. I make that point all the time that he makes the team better on both ends of the court, even when he's not shooting well, which is just like, hey, maybe he's good at his, the ball and hoop game.
And his passing and defense took a legitimate leap that I don't think people fully appreciated until the shooting came around. And then everyone was like, oh yeah, like he figured it out. That's why when everyone was like, I think he's struggling to handle the point guard aspects, I was like, no, like the passing, the distributing, even getting to the rim has improved. He's just missing shots. That has very little to do. With his point guarding game.
Right.
So how does that impact how I look at the draft? Right. So I think Quickley, like, I'm not willing to say he's a guaranteed starter, because I don't think you can say that about most. It's the same reason why someone who doesn't like IQ said, well, you don't think the Knicks have a star on the roster. What do you call RJ Barrett? He's not a star yet. And I don't think you can act like he's going to be. But it does impact my draft position from this. The Knicks have Quickley, Deuce McBride, and Jokubaitis at the point guard position. And all three have some overlap. IQ and Deuce in particular, very good on-ball defenders. Neither has shown the ability to attack the rim at volume. both can guard multiple positions. Jokubaitis is probably right now looks like the best rim pressure guy. IQ took a leap at the end. Like he was legitimately getting to the rim a lot. We'll see if that continues next year. But if I was going to draft a guard, it would be someone in that mold. It'd probably be someone a little bit bigger. There is a point guard in this draft who I would love on the Knicks. But like the thing with Ty, right, is that he's very much in that mold. I like him as a prospect, but he's a pull-up. He was a terrific mid-range pull-up shooter, solid passer with a high assist-to-turnover ratio. But I mean, he wasn't a spectacular passer. He's fine as a defender, solid. Not quite the kind of tenacity you've seen from past Kentucky guards, like particularly Max and Quickley, but he's a good defender, smart player. Like I could see him being a quality rotation guard in the league for 10 years. But I think A, that doesn't provide a different look from the guards the Knicks already have. And B, I think you want to take more of a home run swing in general. Like the big missing piece is freakish wings with some creation ability. So.
Absolutely. I agree. We've talked a lot. Even when I had Schwinn on Draft Class, we talked a lot about the prospect of trying to swing and then hit it out of the park with this one, even if it means, you get a meatball thrown at you and you swing at it stupidly. You might miss, but it's worth it. And I think that where the Knicks are right now is a big part of that, right? I think that where we are with our young core in terms of we like the guys we have, but we know there are missing aspects, right? Like I, going into last year's draft, really wanted them to walk out of it with a twitchy wing project a la Zaire Williams, right? That didn't happen. All those guys were gone by the time they picked. And what did they do? They parlayed that pick into Cam Reddish, which is a long twitchy wing project, right? So there are little, there are aspects of this young core that I think are certainly missing. But I still really like what we've got. Grimes, talk about, I like him in his role. Yeah, that's a guy I love in his role and who I think is really versatile in terms of what lineups he can play with. In regards to those wings, is there a type of wing, a kind of wing specifically that you'd really love to add to this core? I know RJ, Cam, Grimes, I talk about them a lot on here as a fun and complementary core of wings, but I mentioned how like we're kind of missing a Tari Eason or even a Sohan. Either of those types of guys, we don't have one. What do you think about that? Is there someone in this class that jumps off the screen to you as the Knicks could really benefit from adding this kind of player?
Yeah, I mean, I think look at Boston and Toronto's rosters. We just lack wings like that. Cam is the only one. And I'm talking like Toronto can send an army of 6'10" guys, right? So Boston, not quite the same, but Brown is 6'7". Tatum is 6'8", right? Grant Williams fits that mold, is like he plays the 4 a lot for them, but he's a versatile. So just freakishly long dudes with athleticism. And I do think you need to be offensively versatile. Like you can find that guy, but if they're nothing on offense or if they hurt your spacing. So those are and like RJ, so the guys you mentioned, like this is not a knock on Quentin Grimes, but he is 6'5". With this, like he is smaller than Johnny Davis. He plays much bigger. I'm very comfortable putting him 1 to 3 because of his strength. There's probably some 4s he could guard. Yep. Like we saw a certain 4 who will not be named, who was for the Knicks, who was 7'3" and got locked up by Marcus Smart. I could see Grimes doing those kind of things, which probably says as much about the player in question as it does about Marcus Smart or Grimes. But the point is, he's not that freakish guy who's going to generate a ton of steals off ball. Cam brought that. You saw that even though he's far from a finished product, he gave you that. And RJ is like good size for a 3, average size, but he's not freakishly big. He's big for a 2 guard, but you don't have the guys you mentioned are exactly in that mold. Sohan and Eason is the guy that jumps, and I'm like 10 years from now, I could just see teams kicking themselves for not taking this guy. Like he pops off the screen, athleticism, 6'8". He's got Kawhi Leonard sized hands. He can't go left. Like fine. Like he does everything else at a high level. I think he's a pretty smart player who like is just too I think his turnovers and defensive lapses have more to do with being too ambitious than a lack of feel. Right. Other than that, so I think they do need wings like that. So those are the 2 guys in that mold. Dyson Daniels is another guy a lot of Knicks fans talk up. And all 3 are projected to be high level defenders who can guard 1 through 4. In Eason's case and Sohan's case, maybe 1 through 5 someday. And then the only other thing I'd add is besides that type of wing, the Knicks do need a proven 3-level scorer. Quickley is still improving at the rim. Like, I think he's capable of taking that leap, but I'm like I said before, I'm not going to pass on someone who can give me that.
Right.
I think Quickley can develop that independent of whether you take a guy who can do that. RJ, right now, I'm not willing to say he has a mid-range game at all. That's something that he needs to work on. So that is why if you got a wing that could score at 3 levels, which those are still open questions for Eason and certainly Sohan, that's why I would probably prioritize before them a guy like Johnny Davis, who is true wing size. Like, he is the size of he's basically the same size as RJ Barrett, maybe an inch smaller, stronger than Ox.
RJ is probably like 6'6.5". He grew a little bit since he got drafted.
Yeah, RJ is probably like 6'7". Davis like 6'6" with like a 6'9" wingspan. I think RJ is 6'7", 6'10".
Yep.
So I think you could get away with Davis playing the 3, and because of that motor, he's gonna be fine. But he would give the Knicks a legitimate 3-level scorer, which they also do need, ideally from that wing position. So those are the guys that I think Davis is the dream. If they don't get him, I think my dream scenario would be trade to 13 and 15 and take Eason and Jalen Williams. But yeah, I mean, I'll stop there. I talked a lot, but yeah, curious your thoughts too.
No, that 13 and 15 thing, man. I know, and we're going to get into this. Don't worry. I know you're going to wince, but I'd go double Williams there and not Alondes. I'd go Mark and Jaylen. And if you've got 2 firsts, all right, why not use one on a center if you're still walking out with the wing bet with the other? I do think, and again, we'll get to this, but if you've got 1 first-round pick and you use it on a center, okay, that's a little unmotivating when you're in the lottery, right? But if you trade down and walk away with Jalen Williams and Mark, okay, well, now you're talking, right? So I think there are certainly some really interesting and smart ways the Knicks can go about this. With Dyson,
you would do that even if Eason was available?
Oh, Eason, I'm taking over either of those guys.
Yeah.
Eason,
so you're assuming if we trade down Eason, it's not going to be there.
Prez and I are terrified that he's going to fall to Memphis at 22. And the news coming out surrounding his workouts, I included a note on this on my the draft class lottery board 1.0 came out, and Tari was one of the highlighted players because he's not having good workouts from everything I'm hearing. And it's from, bad habits he picked up at LSU play. Like, it's just like, it's not going well for him in the pre-draft process. But I talked about this with the upside swings guys, my guys, Coop and Bryce. Tari's not a open gym workout guy. Some of the stuff that you're really impressed with from Tari are his instincts, his ability to screw things up for the offense, just getting one of those long ass arms in there and breaking things up. That's not going to show in a 1-on-none workout, right? You're not going to be able to make other guys look like idiots with your size and instincts if you're playing against a ghost. So I get why Tari's workouts aren't going incredibly, especially if teams aren't in love with, maybe who he's been at LSU, but I am not passing on that combination of size and length personally. I just, you've got lottery tickets, right? I see these as lottery tickets. And especially with, like I mentioned earlier, with where the Knicks are now, I don't see something wrong with trying to use one and get the biggest prize up at the top. Like the kid behind me can get the little water gun. Like, I'm going for the iPad, right? I don't care if it ends up being fake. I went for the iPad, with Dyson Daniels, something I wanted to include on him is I changed my designation for him on the draft class board. I do like those little descriptors for players. Paolo was a masterful big scorer, and that like is how I try to describe guys. I used to have Dyson as a defending lead guard, which is what people kind of seem to project him as. I switched it to do it all wing with creation upside, because I think that's kind of more the player he's going to be. I don't see him demanding all those touches with the ball in his hands. I know he gets comped to LaMelo and Giddey a lot for Aussie reasons, but I'm not there at all on either of those guys as a comp for him. I think he's going to be a really good player. I think he's going to do it as a wing that has the plus passing chops, and not as someone who, even like Jamal Murray, like is not, a primary ball handler, but still has the ball in his hands a lot. Yeah, I don't know if I see that with Dyson. So you bring.
And is that more related to the burst, or is that related to lack of ball handling, creativity?
All of it. The athleticism is a big thing for me. And I've just talked about on cap or no cap with Jeremy about how much that matters to me, especially with where we are as a team, taking swings on athletic guys that you think your great coaching staff can unlock another tier of play out of. I love those bets for where the Knicks are now. So yeah, Dyson, I don't know if I project him as this, ball dominant guy that he dribbles all game and is just finding and diming guys. And I hope he proves me wrong, because that would be a really fun player. 6'11" wingspan, just under it, 6'7.5" he measured in at. Like that would be really fun, right? I'm not as willing to project him as being this ball dominant guy as some of his biggest fans are, which is why I think he would be a great candidate for the Knicks as a wing ad, right? The
connector, right?
6'11" wingspan. Hey, that's a really promising combination, especially with those passing chops. So I agree with you there that, we could be best served adding a wing who can do stuff we don't have. And some of that comes from just straight up measurements, right? Like what you said about Grimes, RJ not being the most lengthy wing ever. There are even guys like Ousmane Dieng.
I was just going to mention him too.
That serve as interesting home run swings. Prez did an absolutely phenomenal article on Ousmane, breaking down his game and complete with all the clips you need. Great stuff from him there. I got to shout out Draft Class's first guest. But that's something I'd like. I'd like a swing like that, like Jay.
Yeah, I mean, I think I agree with that a lot. Like with Daniels, I see him, he's a different player, but in that Halliburton or Lonzo type mold.
Yes.
And I think he could be really fun. I think Prez and me talked about this, and he was like, well, what if Dyson is just 6'8" Caruso? And I'm like, that actually sounds pretty awesome. Like a 6'8" Alex Caruso.
That's a really awesome, yeah.
But like, I think Knicks fans who are like, oh my God, we're going to have a 6'8" guard, like Luka but that's what's in vogue, right? Like Tatum, Luka, Tatum isn't a point guard, but he's that, wing dominant guy.
13 assists last night. Yeah, most in a finals debut ever is good enough for me.
Yeah, exactly. So, but yeah, like they don't have that player. But they also need better passers too. I mean, who are the plus passers on the Knicks? You have Obi. IQ is probably the second best passer. Well, Rose, if he's healthy. Rose is probably the best passer on the Knicks if he's healthy, but it's really Obi. And then especially on the wings, like RJ has had some great flashes, but we saw the difficulties with Randall in terms of processing. And I'm not talking about just assist totals. I'm talking about guys who can grease the gears of the offense, right? And you saw how much, like when the second unit could get out and run, and they had a lot, like Grimes is a pretty solid passer. Like he can make quick decisions. Daniels is another guy who can get out, another guy who can probably throw the touchdown pass to Obi quite a bit. Those are the things that are similar to Halliburton. Dieng is interesting. That is a home run swing. And I think the more I read, especially when what Pez was saying, having watched the tape, like if you buy the shot, and there's no mechanical reason not to buy the jump shot. Now I said this, there's another guy named Alexei Pokusevsky who also had a mechanical sound shot, and he didn't translate as a shooter, but Dieng is much more productive than Poku ever was. Very smart player. I think like he needs strength, but I think the handle to get to the rim and the athleticism is there. And he's 6'10". I mean, that's the kind of guy you could look back again 5-10 years and you're like, yeah, this is like, I would say he has more of a potential to be that on-ball guy or like a high volume wing scorer, even if he's not a point guard, than Dyson for sure.
Yeah, I think, that growth curve for him is kind of just pointing straight up if that's what you're buying. Ousmane, between the size, the instincts with the ball in his hands, like everything just would, if you buy it all, come together, lift each other up and help him just kind of become a master of the floor out there. Definitely a home run swing. I want to talk about a home run swing that would require a really expensive trip to get a new bat. And that bat would be the 4th overall pick with which to swing. Lots of rumors, man. Lots of rumors about letting some ivy grow in our Madison Square Garden. Do you want to move up Like, dude, is that something you're interested in? What are you willing to include in that package? Like I asked Swin this, would including future firsts and getting ourselves involved with the Stepien rule, like would that be something that bothered you if it meant we walked out of the draft with Ivy, or you just wouldn't care?
That's a good question. So let's start with what I won't touch. I'm not trading IQ. I'm not trading RJ. I'd have to think hard about Obi. I would really have to think hard. I'm not so sure that Sacramento would want him. I don't love that fit with Sabonis, but although it would be a lot of fun on offense, I think they would probably give up 150 points a game.
I was going to say 151.
But IQ and RJ are the only two real untouchables. Next year, I would start with I would start with something like the Dallas pick, Grimes, and maybe another future first. But next year's draft, given how stacked it's going to be, and given that it's quite likely the Knicks are in the lottery again, especially if they're unable to sign a guy like Brunson, I think it's there. We have to be prepared for the possibility that the Knicks just say we're going to run it back, and see what happens, and then the contracts of Burks and Noel and those guys come off the books the next year. They might just take next year as like, let's see what we have in the kids, and kind of scale Randall back, or whatever they end up doing with him. But I would start with the Dallas pick, Grimes. I don't think we can trade Mitch, right? We can't trade Mitch in a draft night deal. And Cam, something like that. And then if you have to add future firsts, I would prefer to do 2024. You could do Dallas 2024 and like 2026, but and I would protect those top 10, but that's where I'm at. Like, I don't want to sell the farm. Especially I do like Ivy a lot. He would be a game-changing player.
Yep.
But I think there are other guys that might be there at 11 that could be. You mentioned Dieng. He's a 2 to 3 year project probably, but when he gets there, he should be really good. Eason could be that guy. I'll tell you what, we love Jaden Ivey, and I think I have him above on my board. There's a guy who gave him 37 and 14 who might be available for us, and his name is Johnny Davis. Yep. And he's not the athlete Jaden Ivey is, but he's a better athlete than given credit for. I tweeted this. If Johnny Davis's jersey had Kentucky on the front instead of Wisconsin, people are not going to saying he's not a great athlete. Watch his tape. The guy can get up. He's not going to like yam on Rudy Gobert on the reg, but he's very quick. He's really good at getting off the ground for shot blocking. Like he gets off the ground real quick. His raw vert may not be that great, but he's a plus athlete. He'd be one of the better. He's probably close to Grimes as an athlete. I think he's that he's a lot like Quentin Grimes. That's I think like my comp for him, except if you just turned Quentin Grimes from a versatile catch and shoot 3-point shooter, if you just gave him the exact opposite game on offense. But like in terms of build and athleticism and how they play on defense, they're very similar. So
yeah, I love Johnny. I believe I've given that Wisco Kentucky quote on Draft Class to one of my guests because I loved that tweet. My favorite comparison for Johnny is that he just straight up looks like an edge rusher when he's getting around screens. Like if you look at the ways in which he's able to contort himself and not fall over, right? Like I try to turn a corner that fast and I'd end up on my ass in 2 seconds, right? He looks like someone who belongs in the NFL, trying to get around a screen. And then you remember he's 6'5", almost 6'6". Oh, wait, he is built like an edge rusher. Like he's really cool. And I think
he'd look good in that Wisconsin 3-4, so.
Yeah, man. I think Johnny is falling victim to some of the same draft isms that Obi did, in the sense that people are like, hey, look at this amazing production. Here's why it's not going to happen at the next level for this, and this, and this, and this, and this.
I was very guilty of that with Obi, by the way. So.
I had Obi 12. So for all the hate I gave him on Twitter for his defense, I still really liked him. Bakri liked him way too much for my liking. So I had to take on this oppositional stance and be like the devil on his shoulder. But I liked Obi a fair bit, just not as a defender. And you know what? He ended up better than I thought he would this soon. So with Johnny, I feel like people are scared of him because he's not dunking on people like Shaedon does. And that's what we're going to talk about just in a second. But with Davis, I think he would be an amazing pick at 11. I have him over Mathurin on my big board. And if you know Worldwide Stress on Twitter, he said that me doing that is the ultimate, like, Michael Scott, 2 middle fingers up to the entire draft community, and that he loves it. And yeah, like, I think Mathurin's really cool. I think he would be a cool pick for the Knicks at 11, but I also think he's going to be gone by like 8 because teams are super high on him, maybe detrimentally, because they think he's so safe of a pick, just because of the athleticism and how a lot of times, but I think the shooting's a little overrated. He shot 29% on uncontested catch and shoot jumpers. So it's like, who?
I think that's randomness. I mean, watch the guy shoot. Like, I think like Hield, he's like a better, more athletic Hield. I do think he'll have, like, the defense is what I think people overrate because there are some bad moments.
Yeah. Oh, good athleticism means elite defender in 4 years. Like, tone it down.
I mean, if he went to San Antonio, I would bet on him being a great defender, but you know, it also depends where you go. But
come play for Tom Tibbs. All right. I want to get to another trade up candidate. Just mentioned him, popular in Knicks fan circles, especially because of his BBN affiliation. He's been universally deemed the Kentucky mystery man of the draft, Mr. Shaedon Sharpe. Talk about athleticism, right? He's kind of an interesting case there. Not anything short of an absolutely incredible vertical athlete, right? Like he is an absolutely incredible. Like, you cannot believe how great of a vertical athlete he is. And then you watch him do a first step and you're like, oh, that looked like 39-year-old George Hill. And was 39-year-old George Hill blowing by Alonzo Trier? Yes. Does that mean that he's, the paragon for athleticism? No, right? Shaedon doesn't look.
I'm pretty sure you could blow by Alonzo Trier. So
I threw a J.R. Smith comp out there for Shaedon the other day, and the more I think about it, the less I hate it. I don't know. How do you feel about Shaedon, and how would you feel about the Knicks paying up to trade up for him? Are you buying that hype?
Yeah, I think that's a great. I don't know if I think he has more in terms of the whole package. I don't think JR was quite that long. I think Sharpe is probably a 7-foot wingspan guy. I expect him to be a more impactful defender than certainly early career J.R. Smith was. I mean, that one season where it all clicked for J.R. on the Knicks, that was like, I think that was peak J.R. Smith, right? Not just he was the most effort he showed on defense. He actually made really good decisions with the ball. I loved him that year. But I think the phenomenon you described, right, where it's a insane vertical athlete, but a slow first step. That is something that always drove me crazy with J.R. Smith, because it seemed like he could never just blow by a dude. So like you would see him do that extremely slow, hard dribble and then step back, right? He loved that. And it just looked like it was in slow motion. And he really got it off more because of his release, because of how high and quick his release is than like actual ball handling or like lateral agility. I'm not sure it's that pronounced with Sharpe yet, and I'm not sure it has to do as much with burst or the fact that his ball handling is still a work in progress. I will say, like, the improvements he made over his high school career are going to be, like, we've seen the Knicks prioritize work ethic and intangibles a lot. Even last year, the fact that Grimes, the guys they liked, Grimes and Deuce and Bones, like, I think they all played in the scrimmages, which a lot of, like, the fact that I think that matters to them, guys who play. I think Schmitz and Givney both tweeted, it says something about a player. I think Deuce was dominant. Grimes was dominant. Obviously took him. But the other guy who they were very rumored to be interested in was Bones Highland, who was also dominant. I think if they could have, they would have tried to get him, but they probably figured they needed Grimes. They probably preferred a little bit Grimes and probably thought, Deuce would be there at 36.
And they had Quickley. So,
I would have been fine with Quickley and Bones.
I would have loved Quickley and Bones.
20 logo threes a night. I'm good with that. That's why if they got Terquavion Smith, I wouldn't mind that either, because he's kind of in that mold too. So with Sharpe, I think the improvement he showed over high school is important. I do expect him to be a plus defender, even though it hasn't come to fruition yet. And like, I think Sharpe has the chance to be what people think Mathurin is, which is a high level elite athlete defender with some creation ability and like a pull-up game. But I think it is worth questioning. The guy hasn't played really in over a year. Why didn't he play? I think the fact that he didn't play in those combine scrimmages, as I just said, is not going to be something Walt Perrin is impressed by. I think they'll probably interview him. They're going to do their due diligence, but I think that becomes a thing. Would I trade up for him at this point? I'm starting to say no. And I'm starting to feel like I think he is in the top 5. But, I think that trading up for anyone below Ivy is a tough sell for me, because I think 5 to 11, 5 to 12, 5 to 13 is a pretty close group. Here's another person. I don't know if you want to talk more about Sharpe, but there is another player who was consensus top 5, who Sharpe has probably displaced, was an elite prospect in high school, kind of had a different game. I'm talking about AJ Griffin.
Love him here on Draft Class. That is the number 1 target here on Draft Class at 11. That's who we've been praying. This is week 8 of Draft Class. This is week 8 of group prayer that AJ falls to 11. So go ahead, man.
Would you trade up for him? And would you put him over Sharpe at this point? That's another question.
I have Sharpe 5 and AJ 6 on my board. So as of right now, those two guys are back to back, and I moved Ivy over Sharpe because ultimately the being able to get to the cup without a screen thing, like that's a thing. And Sharpe has some development to do, especially on the defensive end, to make some of those offensive things he doesn't have worth it. I don't know if he's the passer or if he's the defender to be super high on Shaedon like that. AJ, I love. I think opposite RJ on the wing, like the RJ AJ duo is literally my dream outcome for this draft.
You're not a Duke fan, are you?
No, I'm not. I just love those two guys. And I know AJ's from nearby. Stepinac, Westchester, all that. Maybe if he wasn't going to play at first, he wouldn't have a problem with having his family courtside at every game in Westchester for the first half of the year, maybe. And then at the deadline, we make a move and open a spot for him. His dad coaches for the Raptors, right? Yeah. And he was getting interest from the Lakers as a potential head coach. So they interviewed him, and yeah, his dad's definitely a big deal. I didn't know he was from White Plains. Yeah, this is my neck of the woods. Wow. Yeah, he's from right nearby. I would. He wouldn't have a problem going to the dreaded Tarrytown facility. No, he wouldn't. No, he would. He would stop home for lunch. He would love the dreaded Tarrytown facility. I think AJ would be amazing. Would I trade up for him? All about cost. Ivy's someone who, okay, I could trade up for him and pay whatever the cost is, so long as my certain untouchables are still on the team. I'm able to use picks and not players, yada, yada. AJ is someone who I feel like, because Johnny might be there, because Tari will definitely probably be there at 11, different guys like that. Yeah, I'm way higher on AJ than those guys. And I think I make the point on here all the time, and I made it on my board, that I think that he already regained his athleticism and he was just afraid to test the limits, test the boundaries of it. I don't think that, he was just totally cooked from injury. But the things like the lateral movement, the defense, okay, well, those are concerns that I think are actually really legitimate. And you don't think they're going away with more time to rehab? They'll get better. The lateral movement will get better, but how much better can that get? Right? Like Prez has been begging for years to get OB and hot yoga. Finally, the Messiah JB took him and Quick for a day, and we're gonna see that kid be able to move sideways a little bit now. But with AJ, I think that trading up to where he would be, okay, if he falls to 8 and New Orleans is there and they're saying, hey, we've got enough injury risk with the Duke kid already, we're good. But New York, you want to trade up, just slide us 11 and that Dallas first, and you are here, and AJ Griffin is yours. Man, I am probably putting in that call. But if I get a call from Weaver and who I know likes Shaedon Sharpe, and he says, I watched the tape. I freaking hate this kid now. And I'm going AJ Griffin right now at 5, unless you drop me the 11th pick, Obi Toppin, the Dallas first, and 2 second rounders, 3, like I'll be like, okay, enjoy AJ, man. I hope he does well with Cade. Like I can't, I got a certain point. I can't be bending over backwards for a shot at a guy being good. I always try to remember draft picks are really valuable until they turn into a name. And when you're trading up, you're paying the price for the draft pick, not for the name. And that's tough, especially with the front office obsessed with winning every trade from a value perspective. I not only can I not see it happening, but I don't think I would do it myself just because of that cost and what I know. We want to build this team in a way where picks are going to get used to turn into good players. They are not going to be drafting with every single first round pick. They are going to be cashing them in once it's time to flip the switch and turn competitive. They're going to get really competitive with these trades. This is why I care a lot about not getting too sticky with the Stepien rule. I'm not interested in using several future firsts to move up to 7 with Portland. I can't be sold on totally hampering the path that I think we're taking to sustainable long-term contention. And that's going to be my top priority over anything.
Yeah. And I mean, Aller seems to obviously hold this philosophy. Everyone complained that the Knicks didn't use the 19th pick last year. But I think they value having future picks. You said it yourself. Once the draft pick turns into a name, it's less valuable. For the most part, I think that in certain, like a guy like LaMelo Ball is probably more valuable than the 3rd pick was. But for the most part, yeah, you're gonna see that happen. So I think they're gonna value it. If you're really like, we need to get Ivy at all costs, even if it costs us a 2023 unprotected pick, I would suggest everyone talks about Victor Wembanyama. That draft class is so much more than him. Oh, you talk about Scoot, the Thompson twins. They just can fly.
Amen Thompson is is a New York Knick. I will start speaking that into existence now. Amen. I know it's mean to pick favorites of twins, but Amen really moves me, man.
Yeah, I mean, I'd take them both. But there was a clip that someone put up just of Osar. I'm sorry if I'm saying that wrong. I think it's Osar, right? And he just he took one step inside the free throw line and he just glided. He flew. Right, he looked like Tony Stark powering up his boots, right, and just floating into the air. And there's 7 or 8 guys who I think would probably be in contention for the top pick this year. And so, yeah, you don't want to trade I know people are impatient. Ivy looks like a very special player who would light the garden on fire, but ultimately they're not going to mortgage the future. So I think that's unlikely to happen. And I think this happens every year, right? As soon as you resign yourself to the Knicks being at pick 8 or pick 11 or whatever, you're like, well, actually we could get a star here, right? That's not always how it works out in reality. But there's somebody who said that usually there is a guy in every draft. And at times the current draft czar for the Knicks has been twice. You would have said he actually did that, pull that feet off, right? Where he picked outside of the proven star range. He got a guy named Donovan Mitchell at 13, got Rudy Gobert at 21. So he's capable of doing that. So I have been talking myself more into the guys in our range.
Yep. I like that. I like knowing and trusting that you can find value. I like trusting your coaching staff to an extent where you're able to draft someone that other teams won't put on their board at all because they know they don't have the infrastructure to develop a product. We're not in a situation now where we're going to go out and pick Frank Ntilikina or Kevin Knox and try to let them grow in literally the smallest development circle in the league. Like we are spending money on stuff that's productive now. I trust our infrastructure.
Yeah. So I'll throw this to you though. If you had to predict, right, what's kind of your predictions on the directions the Knicks might go?
I think the trade up for Ivy does not happen. I think that they either stay at 11, and if someone fell that they have like a top 5 grade on, say AJ is there at 11 and they had him 5 or 6, they'll just take him, right? But other than that, if one of their guys isn't there, for example, last year, Zaire Williams, Trey Murphy, Trey Mann, they had guys. and they all went before 19. So what'd they do? All right, we adjust, and they moved back, and they got their guys in Grimes and McBride in the later range, and then turned 19 into Reddish. I can definitely see them moving back. I can see them having a trade lined up with Charlotte for 13 and 15, where they take on Hayward and they wait.
Taking on Hayward sounds good, because that to me is a legitimate plus, especially if we move a certain other big contract on the roster. So.
Yeah, we've got to help us grease the wheels to get Randall out for sure. If that's going to happen, I think, trying to do the point guard, RJ, Hayward, Randall, Mitch is just that doesn't move me much. But I would call Charlotte and be like, hey, our guys are off the board. You can come here. You can come pick at 11.
I think that makes sense, especially I would imagine they would have interest in Duren. And if he falls, I could see, because Perrin seems to agree with a certain philosophy that I've seen put up. Someone really smart was saying, don't take rim running centers in the lottery. So whoever said that, I think they're really smart. And yep. I know I think
Staton.
Pacey Staton. I think Duren is a talented player, probably higher upside than a guy like Mitch.
For sure,
I think there's a better use of that asset for especially with the Knicks, who do need a star. But I could see Charlotte, because they do have their star 6'7" guy. They have a couple, in fact. A center like Duren makes a lot of sense for them. So.
Yeah, I have Duren 11 on my big board right now, and I put out my board, and a bunch of people were like, "Why would the Knicks take Duren at 11?" I was like, "Well, this is a big board, not a mock draft." Yeah, I would not. I would not take Duren at 11 if I were the Knicks, but I would certainly let someone pay me to trade up and do that, right? So that sounds fine. To me, Charlotte, even, Mark Williams is someone they get linked with a lot. I think they should be all over him. I'm high on him. When you have a 9'9" standing reach and you can move the way that kid does, and you are skilled, like his descriptor on my board is just skilled giant, just 2 words, because I think that's what he is, right? And if you have LaMelo Ball and you can get out a lineup that's just gigantic, like you got a bunch of tree trunks out there and just running around, all right, I think that's someone you should be in on, so Charlotte, if moving up for 11 to take Mark Williams would probably be organizational malpractice. But
if they move up, I think it'd be for Duren, but
the fans in North Carolina certainly would love to see, Mark Williams stay in Charlotte. So that would be cool.
Half the fans, right? The other half would
some Duke talk, and then the other half would be very livid, but no, I think that's someone they should be in on.
Yeah. I think if they traded up, it'd probably be for Duren, unless I could see them loving Eason. If the Knicks were to trade back, you kind of mentioned that their guys were gone. If the Knicks were to trade back, who's the guy you think that they would say? Is it some of the names that come to mind? Malachi Branham. Because I feel like Davis is. I can imagine Tom Thibodeau falling in love with Johnny Davis. I think Davis is the guy for them. That would be my guess. Mathurin probably a close second. And then there's a chance they're not into Eason like that. Maybe Sohan goes, or the lack of offense, because they really have it. Like Sims is the only non-shooter they take.
I don't think they would take Sohan, sadly.
I think they prioritize shooting, right? They Obi even was a 39% low volume, but I think you bought the shot more than you did with Sohan, and maybe Dyson Daniels improved. So we'll see. They
definitely bought the shot with Obi. Like they were high on him. Part of that is buying his shot, right? I think the name that jumps out to me is literally who I had next on today's pod itinerary. So this lines up perfectly. You and I both love him, Jaylen Williams. If you're down to wax poetic on him for a little bit, I think he would be a great bet for any team in the late lottery, right outside of it. He's currently 15 on my board. Dyson Daniels 13, Mark Williams 14, Jalen Williams 15, to give you an idea of who's around him. I really like him. I think he's one of those guys that's capital J, capital G. I say this all the time, like just good. He's just good. He's just good at basketball. There's no overthinking to do. You watch him play, he can handle the rock and he can pass it effectively, productively, efficiently. You name the adverb, it's positive he's doing it, right? He can score. Knicks assistant coach Darren Erman got to coach him there at that scrimmage. I talked about this with Chip. He went 7 of 8 from the floor. He had 19 points on 7 for 8 shooting. So with the Knicks assistant being his head coach in that game, you have to think that he came away impressed, especially because we care so much about these scrimmages. It's not even like Ehrman was coaching against Williams. Like, no, he got to work with him. I would think that they like him because of that. And I don't know, man. Williams's leg has to intrigue the front office and talk to you a little bit. But you can't let Stacy and I loose, man. It's like we both turned 12 again. I think they would love to bring in someone like him. RJ, Grimes, Jalen, Cam. You got something cooking. I think you got a little heat, a little spice in that pot, with that wing core. I would love that. Even if Williams isn't, like the Eason type of super long athlete he
is super long. Like he's 7'3", I think 7'2" wingspan. So
yeah, but
not as tall, but
the hand size, everything. Like he's not that freak kind of athlete, but he's still impressive, right? The measurements, everything's still impressive. So I would love Williams, especially if they traded back, if they're there at 11 and wanted to take him. I would probably think that wouldn't happen, only because again, they're obsessed with doing everything that has plus value. Like they loved Deuce, they love Grimes. They got those guys at 25 and 36, which is a double-edged sword because now you have Knicks fans saying, oh, well, Deuce was only the 36th pick, so he can't possibly be a priority. They
should have taken Herb Jones, who's had a great rookie season, but people who act like that was look, when you take Bagley over Luka Doncic, you take someone over the number 3 pick, that's where like everyone saw that coming. But like Knicks fans would still complain about how did they not take Nikola Jokic the way just like 40 other teams, that's where it's like or not 40 other teams, but 40 other picks. That's where you're like, at some point, a lot of this is just kind of luck. But sorry, I interrupted, but that's
no
pet peeve.
No problem at all. I think you're absolutely right. I had Deuce ranked 21st last year. I let out the expletive heard around the world when you took him in the Strickland mock draft, and I was waiting, just camping at 25 with the Clippers, just waiting for Deuce. I wanted Deuce number 1, Bones, if not him, for the Clippers to saw. I got Bones for them, so that's still a great pick.
And it killed me to pass on Bones, but I had to take.
But you had to take Deuce and Man.
I took Deuce and Man, yeah.
Dude, I loved Trey Mann, I loved Deuce, and I love Bones. Those are my 3 guards in last year's draft. So us and forgot Sharif. Those were my 4 guards in last year's draft. So wah. But yeah, I still believe in Reef. That's for another time.
Shout out Oscar NBA.
I would comfortably trade this entire draft class for. All right. Anyway, shout out Oscar MD because he is cool. I don't mean to rag on him. I don't mean to make it sound like I'm exclusively ragging on him. He does great work with you guys at the Strickland. So, we love Strick here on Draft Class. You are our 3rd Strickland affiliated guest, and that's because I have a blast working with all of you guys. I just love the vibe and the approach and all of it. So to any listeners that don't somehow support the Strickland in some way, they've got a wazoo of content and a Patreon with exclusive content, just like us over here at KFS, that you should go check out. To transition a little, Tari, some workout talk with him that we mentioned. If you're New York, this question kind of popped in my head while we were talking about some other stuff. So I'm going to circle back here. You have such an obsession with high character guys, with gym rats, with addicts, with freaks, with psychos. I say here on Draft Class, we love our psychos. What do you make of Tari's bad workouts? Do you care? Would that count as a home run swing? Is taking a guy you normally wouldn't because he's not super, doesn't seem to be in at 5 a.m. and out before class in the morning every day into the gym? Do you really care about that workout stuff the way I said I didn't?
Well, first of all, I will say that there have been a couple of prospects where I've seen conflicting reports. Some people say their workouts are good. Some people don't. So keep in mind that there are teams with a vested interest. If you're the Knicks and you love Tari Eason, you have a vested interest in the Pelicans thinking that his workouts have been bad. So that's number one. Or maybe it's the case that, if you want to arrange a trade down. I'm not sure that the workouts themselves indicate like a poor work ethic from Eason. If you looked at how much he has improved, I'll plug this. I don't know how many of you follow Chip Jones, but if you're into the draft, I would follow him on Twitter and subscribe to his YouTube channel. He had a great breakdown on Tari Eason. And if you looked at what he was in high school, he was just a freakish dunker. As a freshman at Cincinnati, he met some good statistical thresholds in limited minutes that are always good for interesting freshmen. But I think he was like a 60% free throw shooter, very poor free throw shooter, ugly form. The form has not improved that much, but he doesn't take his guide hand off. He's brought the ball in, and this is like super tech. I'm not going to take credit as some laser-eyed. This is from Chip's video, which again, it's really good. But he improved his form. He's gotten stronger. And he's improved his handle a lot. I don't think those improvements happen from non-psychos, the kind of improvement that he had, because it wasn't just like physical bullying.
Yep.
His touch has gotten a lot better. The shot has a low release and he kind of like catapults it a little bit, but you can't argue with the results, both from the free throw line and from three. So I'm not so sure that he would be I think that might apply more to, again, what I mentioned with Shaedon Sharpe and I'm not going to say that it's like everyone has to play in the scrimmage, but when you particularly are someone who hasn't played, like, do you just not want to play? Are you afraid of showing stuff? Afraid may be the wrong word, but is there something you're hiding? Right?
Yeah. Like that first step, right? It's kind of convenient that the only stuff that came out of Shaedon at the combine were amazing wingspan measurement, cool height measurement, awesome.
Would you call it shady?
Awesome video of him jumping straight up and down,
Yeah.
Like there are NFL front offices that I know factually refer to the combine as the underwear Olympics because it's just absolutely useless and no one's ever going to run 40 yards in a straight line. Well, I think the combine scrimmages are pretty representative of what some NBA action might look like for these guys. I bring up Michael Foster Jr. here on Draft Class as someone I can see the Knicks absolutely pick 58 Jerichoing. If there's a team willing to sell their second round pick and Leon goes, Jamesy buddy, please drop $500K on a second rounder. I really need this guy in Westchester for a year and he's going to be our new Taj and please, I can see them taking these combine scrimmages seriously. So I also see them taking Shaedon not doing anything seriously. They were there front row for Ivy. They're front row for a lot of different guys and no Shaedon to watch. So
yeah. And, but I don't think it'll hurt Eason, the workouts. If they see something in that workout that they just don't like, I think that would have to do more with his actual game and movement rather than, I think the off the court stuff. And if you look at his motor, he's going to be a guy that alternates between Tibbs loving and who drives Tibbs crazy, right? Because his mistakes, like I think he fouled out, it was a freshman, but he fouled out in 7 minutes in a game. So he'll do that. But I think that if you look at the improvement, I think he will fit right in. Even though I think out of this draft, the guy who sticks out as like that kind of Knicks guy is definitely Johnny Davis.
Yeah.
We did just talk about the second round. Is there someone at pick 42? You mentioned a couple guys. There's one guy who comes to mind, especially if they went with Eason or more forward wingy type players. There is one guy. What
is it? A-Dubs?
Yeah.
All right, let's talk about it because again, I'm being dead serious. I'm going to send you the document after because I don't know how you're doing this. I told Stacy before the show that I was not going to tell him the question so that there could be an element of surprise. And the second time in a row, you have guessed my next question perfectly. That's exactly what I was going to bring up next was, between Malachi Branham, if he falls, apparently his 3-point shooting, as Rafael Barlow told you guys on the pod over at Strick is not looking great in the workouts. Maybe he falls late first. Alondes, Bryce McGowan's, Leonard Miller. There are names there that late first, even maybe early second range that really, really intrigue me and that also represent some major philosophical differences in what kind of pick the Knicks would want to make there. Look at McGowan's Miller even further on that end of the spectrum. And then there's Alondes, who plays like he is from the 80s, right? So there's a whole broad width of guys there. I was going to ask you philosophically, what do you want to do with that second rounder? For me, I think that's where Perrin is a god at finding good guys, good players, Grimes, McBride, Sims at 58, credit to Sir Brock for that. But Quick at 25, right? Like this front office is killer at killing those late first, early second round picks.
We didn't mention Jokubaitis, but I think, he won.
I don't even bring him up because we have I feel like there's not even enough people that have watched him overseas to know like the improvement he made last year is real. And I don't want to just keep talking about he really improved and hype him up for him to get here and be okay. So I'm not trying to put too much pressure on him to be good among Knicks fans, because if guys aren't instantly amazing, then they were a waste and they were a project and yada yada. Why did we take another project? It's like, maybe give Obi more than 6 games to figure out what he's doing on an NBA court in a different role that he's played for the last 4 years. Yeah. So Alondes Williams, my favorite guy. Prez sold the hell out of me on him. And as I keep watching more and more tape, I just realize this is a kind of player that I kind of just would prop up regardless. This is, to shout out Prez for the 8th millionth time this show, because he and I talk so much about the draft. He really does influence my thoughts a lot. The Kris bait guy, is anyone who's large that can pass, anyone who's bigger than they should be for their position. Like David Roddy, dude, I think he is so funny and I love him. I think he's going to go a little higher. So he and EJ Liddell, I both love, but I think those are two guys who might go higher than they should, just because Grant Williams is killing it in the playoffs and teams are suckers for getting it shown right in their face that, a player is good and being like, oh, let's just go get one of him.
But everyone thought they were getting the next Draymond Green for the last however many years, right? So it's like Steph comes along and is literally like game-changingly unique and generational, and teams are like, well, Quickley, Highland, we might have a mini Steph here. In Quickley's case,
Jordan Poole is
a better version of Steph.
A better, yeah, that's right.
Quickly is actually, but that's not hype. Quickly is already a better version of Steph. So just
when he put the orange and blue on, he was second. He donned the orange and blue for the first time. That was when he became the best point guard in the NBA. So,
but what you saying with
this, man, wax so poetic on him for me, because you've recently seemingly fell in love with him.
Well, Prez has been hyping him up for a while. I do think philosophically it would be departure, as we mentioned, the shooting, especially from their guards. They seem like they haven't drafted a guard who can't shoot pull-ups at a high level. Jokubaitis is the closest thing to that, and even he's a pretty good pull-up shooter. But Williams is fun to watch, especially as a passer. And you think about Alondes and Obi in transition, how fun that would be. Like, obviously, Quickley and Obi are fun together, but like the ball fakes, like there's 2 controversial names I've dropped recently. So going back to Jalen Williams, at times the way he uses his body, he has this combination of speed and size where he's not the quickest guy, but he's not the strongest guy. But I mean, you play basketball, so if you have to guard a guy and you're strong enough to guard him, but you have to brace yourself for that impact, it hurts you laterally, right? And if you're ready to move laterally and a guy puts a shoulder into you, you're at risk for that. Luka is probably the best in the league at doing that, in terms of he doesn't look like he's moving at particularly fast pace, but he's able to use that combination of size and strength.
That old man strength.
Yeah. So as soon as I say Jalen Williams is like Luka, I'm going to get pushback. I'm not saying Jalen Williams is as good as Luka.
The comps are so dangerous. You could say, hey, I think Bones Highland's twitch coming off of screens reminds me of Steph. You think Bones Highland is going to be as good as Steph? Yeah, no, yeah, I feel it.
LOL plus ratio, right? L plus ratio. But Williams, the way he moves on off, that's why like a lot of people are saying, does the burst show up? He had the 39-inch vert. I was like, it's enough burst where with his strength, it's a very fearsome combo. Going back to Alondes Williams, I'll throw out even a more blasphemous name. When I watch the way he manipulates defenders in transition, how he can throw passes with one hand off a live dribble, just how he looks is like this big hulking guy coming down the court, hunched over a little bit, playing mind games, just like throwing no-look passes. I'll say it. I've been watching Winning Time, and I've watched a lot of Magic Johnson highlights. You get some of the way he passes the ball. It's a lot of fun. I think he's going to be a fun player. What?
I've got a number 32 Mitchell and Ness in that closet right there.
There you go.
That I bought over lockdown when it first started. So Winning Time now has been pretty cool for me because I read the Magic versus Larry book like a while ago, and that's part of what helped me fall in love with learning the history of the league. Like after that, I went on a Hakeem bender, a Hakeem tape bender, and now I think he's the third best player to ever do it. So
Schwinny Poo would agree with you there. He loves Hakeem.
He loves Hakeem with me. So yeah, that's someone I've got on my side for that. Kris Genda. But no, I totally get what you're saying. First of all, about being scared to comp guys to legends, but it's about the aspect of his game. And Alondes, he's the name I throw out the two names, the Celtics guards, both Marcus Smart and Derek White, as guys that he reminds me of just a little bit in terms of early offensive roles he could get into, right? Think about what Smart was doing a couple of years ago. Think about what White does for the Celtics now. Like, it's not a whole lot of ball dominance, right? They have other guys but there's something about a chunky point guard in this modern NBA where I'm kind of in love with that archetype. I think Deuce McBride can be a starting point guard on a team that has a jumbo initiator. And I said that on Cap or No Cap, and Andrew went, as if I was saying, Deuce being locked for being a starter is scary, but I think that's the way the league is trending. I think guys start in certain eras that might not start in others because of how the league goes. And right now we're looking at, look at Luka, now look at Tatum, and look at Giannis and all these guys. So you got these big ass initiators, man. I think having a stocky, chunky point guard who can stop the POA and is a plus passer is an amazing compliment to those kind of guys.
And Alondes gets to the rim at will, which is the one thing none of the Knicks. Jokubaitis is the best at it, but
that's saying something.
Yeah, but he is good at getting the rim. But you don't have that's why everyone loves Sharif Cooper, right? Quickley is taking steps there. Deuce, that's the weirdest thing about Deuce's game. He's a pretty good athlete. He can dunk. You've seen him throw down some nice dunks, including that famous one on Cade. And he's jacked. He looks like a linebacker, but he just loves that midi pull up. And then the second stint at the end of the season, I think he probably got chewed out for some of his mistakes earlier in the season. He just seemed to be channeling Frank Ntilikina on offense and just get out of Quickley's way. I will say he put up an 8-to-1 assist to turnover ratio. Pretty impressive.
I love Deuce, man.
I think Deuce is going to be really good. And I think that's when people are like, he hasn't proven it. Are we sure we want to go in with him as a backup next year? Yeah, I'm fine with that.
Why did he fall to 36 if he's going to be so good?
Yeah, I mean,
why?
why did Ayo fall? I mean, first of all, last year's draft was really stacked. Every pick.
And the fact that I had Deuce 21 in that draft means I'm really, really high on him. 21's not bad.
Yeah. 25 is the next lucky number. So, but yeah, a guy like Jared Butler went 40th. Now there was, the heart issue or whatever, but Sharif fell, right? Ayo went late. It was just a really stacked draft and guys are going to fall. Going back to Alondes though, he gives you that elite rim pressure. He has saucy handles. You can see why Prez likes him. Big, strong guy, gets the line. I think he's a solid free throw shooter. And the 3-point shooting was bad, but the volume was there. So that bodes well if you're comfortable taking them. There's such a thing as being too comfortable taking them. Shout out Russell Westbrook. But, I think that, he'd be great in round 2. And I think he'd probably be, I think that the Knicks, we had to sit through a year of a 6'5" guard who couldn't shoot because of quote unquote the defense he brought, right? If you made us sit through Elfrid Payton, get me the guy who is what Tibbs thinks Elfrid Payton is, and that's Alondes. So
yeah, that works, right? People talk about needing to hand Tibbs a certain kind of team. Just tell Alondes to wear 6 and change his last name
and
legally.
Be a lot slower and worse at getting through screens. Yeah.
No. That's ruining the plan. We're going to change his last name to Payton. We're going to have him wear 6, and we're just going to tell Tibbs that Alfred's back and hope that he doesn't notice. That's the plan, man. I got one more question for you before I let you go here. we got to talk about the other side of this center conversation. You don't want to take one in the first round. You don't want to take, basically the Knicks have a kind of big they like, the Walt Perrin big. There's a guy who went out online and wrote a very large dissertation on how stretch bigs aren't real. And then the dissertation magically vanished and New York Knicks got added to his LinkedIn bio. So we hired him. Give me one name quick, a second round center that you'd like, Koloko, Kamagate, whoever it is, who's someone you love.
It's absolutely Koloko. I think that the people are talking about the shooting. He had a good workout. I think he shot well. But the reality is like, he kind of can already what Prez would call fake shoot. So I think like, he's probably like, someone like Zeke Nnaji, like you could see.
Shout out Miles Turner.
Not even Miles Turner. Like, I don't think he's that level yet, but Zeke was hitting open threes against the Knicks. He can hit that elbow. And so like, he can do more on offense. I think that's Koloko's in that mold. And then he gives you the mobility and rim protection you'd want. You get him at 4. That's part of the reason I don't really want to take Mark Williams or Duren in the lottery, is because you probably can get a guy like Koloko. Maybe he goes in the first. He probably should go in the late first. I don't think he's that much worse than those two guys. He's the main guy. And then he's not a big. He should not be played as a big. And I'm very curious to see where he ends up. But there is a 7-footer who really intrigues me in the second round as well. A man by the name of John Butler, who
love that.
Who, if you look at him, he makes Chet Holmgren look like Zion Williamson. I think he's about 20 pounds lighter than Chet Holmgren. To put it in perspective, Butler is 174. There was one player in the NBA last season who was lighter than that. He was also one of my favorite players in last year's draft, but it's more acceptable for Bones Highland because he's 6'3". John Butler is 7 foot tall with like a 7'3" wingspan, but excellent shot blocker with a gorgeous stroke. And he's got some handle. Like he brings the ball up the floor. He's also very fluid, can probably, again, switch onto guards like Leonard Hamilton, who is a mad scientist when it comes to freakish long
Master.
Guys. He had Butler pressing full court a lot, and he had the fluidity to do that. He's not going to be ready to contribute for at least 2 or 3 years, but as maybe a two-way guy or like, a project, I love it. Cause like if he hits, that's something like Cam Johnson, but bigger. Cam Johnson, but bigger, which right. I think we'd all take that. So.
Absolutely. All right, Stacy, last thing, anything you want to plug before you get out of here?
YM. No.
Talk about who's a mad scientist for freakish long guys. Yeah. YM. I know something about that. All right. Well, what do you got?
Pod Strickland. I'm doing it every week. Follow the draft coverage on the Strickland, follow Prez, speaking of mad scientists. And then the other thing I'll plug is, for those who may not know, I've been doing a pod with Matthew Miranda on Believe Sports. So we will be having one that'll probably release either Sunday or Monday, with a very special guest who I won't spoil here, but check that pod out if you enjoy listening to me on here, or with Schwinn, if you want me to, with another co-host who's not quite as Schwinn, but want a different take, you can find me there as well as just on Twitter at Stacy Patton 89.
Stacy, thank you so much for coming on. Everyone, make sure to throw him a follow. Thank you, man. I can't thank you.
Thanks for having me. This was a lot of fun.
And absolutely.